I just want to say while making this video is not in any way meant to go and attack a guy named Kratos. This is just why in the title I feel like he is lame. Why I feel like a lot of the ways that he moves is lame. And my personal experience of talking to him, at the same time citing, at the same time accounting, in some ways, multiple different forms of, topics, and same time case of arguments of him, and same time, different people's opinions that I've personally heard, but at the same time it's just more of a record for the fact that I'm not making this video to hate on him and or diss him just because. I'm not doing this for clout. I'm not doing this just for the fun of it. This has nothing to do with any possible just petty whatever faulty grievances reasons to diss or slash make this video. This video is simply put just to go and explain why I do not have likeness for him, why I do not respect him anymore, and just in general why I think he is lame, as seen on the title of this video. With this being said, to go and get into it, I want to go ahead and start off with just, talking about my experience with Kratos, at the same time talk about how I met him in a greater personal sense, but as well how I first even heard of him. When it comes down to Kratos's, way of talking, right, and my experience with him, he felt like a guy that, as I knew him before, a very educated, very really smart and wise dude about his arguments or what he knows. And still to this day, regardless of how I feel about him, he still probably is one of, if not the most knowledgeable person on God of War scaling and possibly lore and things of that sort. And is a very educated brother on power scaling, different aspects of that stuff as well. So with that being said, that is the reason why I was out here wanting to not just talk to him, but at the same time, how I met him through a greater form in a way. And this all ties to my video where he commented on it saying that, he thinks a lot of my stuff is wrong, a lot of stuff needed to be, talked about, and basically wanted to go about debating slash conversating with me about why my video was this and this and that. And I commented back slash replied with none but respect, I gave him his flowers. And again, like I say, to this day, regardless of how I feel about him, it is not disperse slash make any of what he's talking about wrong in any sense of the way. But again, when it came down to me actually having that conversation, no cap, he was a very respectful person, Again, I gave him his flowers, we had a cool conversation. Plan to go and upload it to YouTube, but my recording got, distorted in the mix, and so I couldn't. And, a few different technical things with that being said. But with all that being said, though, the conversation led to me getting more knowledge. I got properly educated. And tied with that, I now feel that a greater deal of my knowledge in the case of my God of War power scaling tier list, which is obviously, where he commented on, is wrong. Even though I do agree with a lot of things that he probably would, still to this day disagree with, and possibly even more, unironically, I still think, again, as I made it clear in the title of that video of editing it, knowledge check, that a lot of what a lot of you guys might think I think is stupid, at the same time in the actual video doesn't make sense, does tie to something of greater deal. It isn't just me saying stuff to say stuff. There's a lot of reasons for why I believe what I believe then, and probably now still, depending on what we're talking about. One day, maybe I'll redo my entire tier list and I'll go more in depth with that. But just for the record, obviously, that I don't agree with a lot of what that video has to offer. And since that debate and a great deal of time, I've, reevaluated my knowledge and think a great deal of it, again, as well, is wrong and shouldn't be taken into actual face value, with that being said. But again, it doesn't change the fact that, again, a brother went about having a conversation with him there, and he was respectful. Same with his boys, whoever, was in there. And it was a cool, whatever case of debate, and I explained my purpose and my reason for a greater deal for why I believe what I believe, with this being said. And yeah, but moving onwards, when it came down to the case of me out here, being in his Discord server, Mount Olympus, and talking to a few people and seeing a few people that I knew of, in this case being the Chad Champ, who I have none but great respect for, as a content creator and things along those lines, tied with the same time seeing True, who I don't know if is actually a content creator, but just a known person in the power scaling technical community, if that's the case or not. As well, the fact that, a man saw different references and talks of different matter of power scaling and things along those lines. It just seemed like one of those servers that I used to, be a part of back in the day that I wasn't part of anymore because of kind of similar reasons, but not exactly the same, reasons for why I left in this sense, even though in this case I was more forced to leave, to be exact. But to be fair, man, probably would have left regardless. But again, we're going to get more into that when we get more deeper into it. Simply put, when it came down to the conversations and the people that I met in there, it seemed all around cool. But slowly over time, even though to be fair, this is all over fiction and just disagreements, it seemed like more or less because of disagreeing or having fundamental different perception and ideal for what is this and this and that, that if you disagreed with what Kratos believed, it seemed like it was basically a personal sense of thing to him that you could not see things differently. And I say this from the perception of the fact that from me trying to explain my stance on a disagreement that we had involving who was more powerful / the rationale for why in a Norse tier list of one of his members named Flash, correct me if I'm wrong, had a perception of why Thor was below Heimdall and why Heimdall was very high in comparison. Now, I do believe with reevaluating greater case of, explore different power scan talks and obviously how Kratos perceives him, right? And what happened in the fight, that Heimdall is a very powerful dude and very up there. Don't get me wrong. But I still stand to this day that Thor, I feel like, has reasonable credibility to be over Heimdall. Not so disparagingly, but has a lot of capabilities and things about him that would make him reasonable to best him, in my opinion, even with the arguments for dropping there. Now, I'm not going to get into too much of that because I already kind of explained the hell out of that with him, another Discord member. And if y'all want a video on that or want me to explain that in deeper form, sure. But I kind of already made it clear a little bit in my own God of War power scan tiers why I feel like there's a great deal of reasons for why some people, even without dropping here, can best Heimdall. And I feel like with how his precognition is explained and represented, that there's reasonable merit in some people, even without dropping here, having credibility in besting him, even without it, even with it being stated to be obviously, the only source of way that they, the case of our, main characters, could best him. And arguably in general for what was shown, but even then still, and that disagreement, even though there's a bunch of different things tied with it, I feel like how I came off was very respectful in trying to give better insight, while he came off at some occasions very aggressive, very passive aggressive in how he was going about it, sometimes being condescending, just deliberately rude for no real reason besides the fact that he felt like what I was saying was stupid. And it's one thing if you think what I'm saying is stupid, or you think I don't know what I'm talking about, because he possibly perceived the same thing even if he didn't watch my entire tier list, right, for that. But to me, how I went about it in the tier list and comment sections before, and the cases in the server, is that if you disagree with me, that's cool. But I went about respectfully disagreeing. I went about being cordial. I was being modest. I was being humble. And I didn't come at nobody any different type of ways because I disagree with them or saw a different side of things. I was being very respectful. In hindsight, very, I feel like, objectively critical of just the simple, discussion at hand, not anything deeper. So when he started getting very out of pocket and over, doing the entire case of trying to basically press on my mindset for why I believe what I was doing, I feel like it was blatantly just a showcasing of a guy not just taking the subject matter too seriously, but just acting disgraceful. Because listen, everybody got their personal perceptions about how to conversate and do different things, but I think it is very objectively seen multiple times over for a lot of people that if you start coming at people over simple disagreement, regardless of it's fictional, real life, or whatever, that you look like a goofy, and most importantly, you are just taking the conversation way too seriously than it needs to be. I do not see any true objective reason to talk the way that he talked a little bit in it. And don't get me wrong, he didn't come at me, I think, in a personal sense. I'm not trying, to lie and be intellectually dishonest and represent him in like a false ordeal. But I do think that, again, how he did it, which is what I'm going to actually get to about actually breaking down, was just unneeded and deliberately showcasing of just out-of-pocket talk. You know what I'm saying? And the talk mainly involved with the fact of not just saying what I'm saying is retarded when he wasn't account for what I was saying in comparison, involving my perception of precognition, capabilities of Thor, why I believe that even with every merit for why Heimdall is a beast as he is and how he should be, doesn't necessarily make him more severely this and this in comparison to Thor himself, even with Kratos as well. Because obviously Kratos, you know, best Thor, well, lesser than all. So, with that being said, that to me, I feel like was not understood by him, and I feel like how he took it was just very unorthodox and deliberately just out of pocket, and just how he talked with speaking vulgar, being disrespectful in those merits, it just is unneeded. And because I didn't record a conversation, I do not have it on hand to go in deeper talk about, but I just feel like it's unneeded with how he did it, right? And I didn't feel no type of personal way about it, because at the end of the day, it ain't that serious. And at the end of the day, by the time we had this conversation, it was early morning, not too early that I couldn't have a conversation with him, but it's too early. At the same time, it's fiction. You know, nobody should be taking it that serious. So let me make this clear. When I say this stuff, this isn't my reason for why I don't mess with him. We're going to get to that, and this is what this video is kind of supposed to represent. It's just the fact of that is like a ground for why I felt the way I felt in comparison. Because again, you shouldn't be getting that press and getting that much like in a mad lad talk over just because of the fact that somebody disagrees and has a different personal perception of something that is, I feel like, very reasonable, again, if you understand why I believe what I believe, which I kind of briefly stated. But talking about someone personally, saying that you fucking them this, fucking them that, it's weird. It's objectively weird and it's unneeded. And, you know, there's no professionalism, I guess, to a mixed merit in the debate, but there is like a decent gray credential line with how you talk to people. And to me, how he talked was entirely unsensible and just deliberately unneeded. And so I feel like that's a show of his character. But going further, though, throughout the rest of the time in the Discord server, again, people was cool, people was chill. I didn't really see any different diss thing. People were just God of War fans there, it seems like, and that's cool, right? And regardless of, like, you know, me correcting somebody on how to spell Ragnarok, as it was one little miss up, as this member True, the person I'm talking about, who you guys might know, right? He spelled Ragnarok wrong, and it wasn't even like I was trying to belittle him or put him down. He just spelled Ragnarok wrong for 1 second, and I just corrected him by just putting Ragnarok. It was a small error, and it's not like I was coming at him personally with it, because no offense, Drew spelled Ragnarok not as Ragnarok. He spelled Ragnarok just like that, but actually spelled rock as rock, just with ROCK, from what I remember, because I don't have the case of the, you know, messages to go ahead and use on screen or in comparison, because of the fact that you know, I'm not in a Discord server, and to be fair, you know, I don't care that much. It's just what led after that as it being a small joke was this man basically thinking that I was coming at him and trying to be a hypocrite or being obnoxious, when I wasn't bullying the man. I wasn't coming at him. I wasn't laughing at him. If anything, I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but if somebody was laughing, it seemed like Chad was laughing at him because of the fact that he misspelled it. It was in jokes. It wasn't that deep. And listen, I'm not gonna act like I'm the perfect speller, typer, writer, or whatever, even though I feel like I have great, you know, capabilities in my writing, typing, and perception, and unraveling how to be literate and be strong in my case of talk, especially as a person that big cares about writing, you know, writes books, and at the same time, you know, produces content of this sort where, you know, scripted or, you know, set in stone for, you know, what I'm trying to put out there by my words. I just feel like it's a reasonable thing to just correct for a small point in time. It's not that deep to where it should really take a whole different level of, I feel like, press, which wasn't entirely shown. It's just, to me, it just shows that this guy, I feel like in some way, just because someone that he fucks with gets either, I don't know, corrected on or said something to that he feels like isn't, you know, the most perfect standing or something, it's a bad thing. When there's been people who said things to him in comparison that if you're another person for how you perceive it, it might be something else. And at the end of the day, it's all about perception. But it's the fact that this dude, to me, got mad, pressed, and overly all around just unneededly aggressive with it when no one said anything about them being more perfect than others. I would be a hypocrite by textbook definition if I act like me spelling is always perfect. If I act like I'm better than him. No one was coming at Drew. Nobody was pressing Drew. Nobody was disrespecting Drew. So to me, it's just another example of, which is going to be kind of a common effect, but just dick riding a little bit. But that's, kind of irrelevant thing. It doesn't really matter. It's not that serious. Here's where we get to the actual problem at hand. So we're going to fast forward and get to the point a little bit. That's kind of when to break down a little bit. But I want to talk about just a few positives, but at the same time, bigger depth things to want to say about Kratos. Number one, how I even heard of Kratos, I became a fan of him, was obviously with his YouTube channel. And the fact that I, right, like a lot of others, fuck with him because of the fact that he was not just very knowledgeable on God of War, but seemed like a very cool case of content creator, or whatever the case may be there, right? So, with that being said, in comparison, a man really fucked with his shit, fell in love a little bit with the content a little bit, and, respected him. Because, he educated me about a lot of different greater things about God of War. I saw his original tier list on the God of War, right? And, but just thinking about God of War scaling in a greater regard, especially because of the fact that a man really got more big pop into bigger interests and think of it when I made my iconic video of why the Tarnus versus Thor is not a debate video, which a lot of you who, are viewers of this channel might have came from, and is, my second to third most popular video on this channel, right? So with that being said, in comparison, a man had great number of respect, but I've been a fan so long that I've seen, his interactions with other people, heard about him in different Discord chats, I've seen him interact with, Sir Splash, heard they got, notice from Seth the Programmer, who is, a guy that was once too, arguably still, the most popular case of matter of, power scaler, regardless of him as a person, and, Chuck has talked about him, other people have talked about him, he's been referenced countless times, he's very respected to a decent regard from what I know, right? But even then, with all that being said, him and his knowledge, even sometimes I could see arguments against or didn't entirely agree with, especially because of how it's been used, like the fact that even though, yes, there's credence to say that, Greek era characters are stronger than Norse characters on greater regard, doesn't take away the fact that my stance, even like explaining my, shameless plug, Hades vs. Thor video, that I believe that a lot of the statements said by the, creators of God of War and how it's narratively shown still supports some characters being stronger than others. But even then, I still respected him. I gave him his flowers. I've been none but humble and respectful to him. And even then, I've never went to a greater, out-of-pocket talk regard to him, as I've always stated, and or, thought of bad. But the thing is, with being a fan of him, some aspects of his character I feel like were a little bit shown in some occasions when, he can be a little bit disrespectful, rude, take something a little bit too seriously from another person, act in ways that I think you can reasonably give the critique of being just a little bit OD in the way for how he walks and talks, I guess you could say, in this example. And these examples come from different debates of people across different points in time that, I vaguely remember, but I could not be right on. Talks within debates involving Sir Splash, not him himself, but on his channel. But in the case for, his talks involving God of War just being a little bit too OD for how he carried himself in some different conversations with me. And it's not, very credible proof. So again, I'm not trying to say this to basically, slander or basically slam his name into the ground. But basically from different things that I've heard and seen from the case of different, videos of his own and talks from other people in different forms and talks of how he scales and or conversates with how he scales, it definitely seems like a guy who, even if you want to argue he's not narcissistic, he's just very passionate, it seemed like a guy that thinks he knows better so highly but doesn't actually move in the way of a person who actually wants to educate, more like a person who kind of wants to bully you into believing different. To me, he's a guy that acts like he knows so much better, but doesn't actually have all the facts and or weight of being so much better than their person to where if you think different, you are instantly invalid. He does not write the script, I guess, for how you actually need to power scale and do things. And I feel like nobody should act like that. Like, at the end of the day, you can be passionate and, to his credit, be more knowledgeable than like 90% of people maybe that talk about God of War, but it doesn't make you a better person. It does not make you a better individual, and it does not rationalize out-of-pocket behavior or actions that make you look like a goofy. And this is where the whole lame talk comes from. You see, all them talks that possibly can be had with different people in discussions or talks, there's an argument to say that in those contexts, there might be bigger reasons for why he might say what he say or do, and you might say that it's a little thing to get, possibly an oppressed matter like this you could possibly perceive, even though I'm not really mad at the brother. It's more the fact that it's just a dislike thing. If anything, I dislike him. I don't hate him. I don't know him. I don't care for him like that. And it doesn't matter. What I say here is just I feel like a reasonable credence in saying that, yes, it is truthful that him as a person may not be a bad person or a out-of-pocket individual, but it's just how he talks and how he goes about shit. It's not some like the most, I feel like, nice individual person. And that's kind of what this is more about. But it does seem lame, which is where we're going to get to the bigger credence and for why I say what I say here. So, you simply say why I feel what I feel with this is when we get to a newer conversation that is kind of recent, kind of like a almost 3-day old kind of thing, but basically where I came to his Discord, right? And I was in it, you know what I'm saying? It's not like I rejoined different point, even though, to be fair, I did leave at one point because I wasn't trying to be pressed back to back with the, like, just false understanding of my points. I wasn't trying to get spammed with that and possibly have this conversation later, right? At a different point, because again, it was early morning when I had that first conversation I mentioned of, with again the whole talk of, Heimdall versus Thor, basically. But the full talk, you know what I'm saying, I was in his Discord. I was very honored and seemed, very, I would say, very humble and solemn with how I typed it from my memory, right? At first, when it came down to the case of the disagreement of this newer thing. And when I had this conversation, right, the conversation was based off the fact that when I went into the Discord, I asked if anyone's good at judging. And this is because I discussed in my own little group chat with my homies that you guys might, know and remember from my video of could Elden Ring win the Tournament of Power. And we were discussing about the fact that somebody disagreed with some of my different points and stances, or, had a whole different mindset or made arguments and claims that would, like, kind of devalue my stance in the whole video. And I feel like there's reasonable arguments to be had to say that their opinions and stances were wrong, right? And you can go look at, both of our arguments on the case of that video if you want, but simply to say, right, I came to him in his Discord server that, again, I'm already a part of, and I was honored and being cool in my presence in, right, and saying that, simply put, I want to know if anybody was good at judging. It took a minute for him to even say something. I was thinking about someone else judging, you know what I'm saying, but I was saying in the thing that, I would be honored for him to go about, judging my shit. So with that being said, when he went about, peeking my stuff and talking about how, I'm really good at judging and I wanted to go about, possibly judging it and seeing about it, right? I explained what it was about. And as you guys obviously heard the context from, it's about Elden Ring and involving Elden Ring, and if they could beat, all the other universes within the universal, tournament of power. And he was like, basically, yeah, after I explained, that I was a very big knowledge keeper on Elden Ring, as I like to say, I have a great deal of knowledge on it still to this day. So when it came down to him talking about it is when we disagreed. But again, I was being respectful and saying I would be honored, I would appreciate it if he judged. And if the debate ever does happen, even though I don't have, lightness for the dude, and I don't think it would be good for us to even be in any possible conversational sense, even though obviously it's him judging and not us talking, right? I would still, I guess, in some way appreciate it if he did, but, obviously that doesn't need to happen, and probably won't with me making this video, which, I'm going to explain in deeper detail kind of why, in a greater form, why I made this video. Besides just obviously me stating my opinion about him, right? Because this isn't from a ill will perspective. But when he started talking about his, perception and stance on Elden Ring, and different stuff. When he said that the Tarnished was immeasurable, that's when I kind of disagree. Now, this stands from the fact that he perceives what the Tarnished does to get to Placidusax and different matter of shit like that as immeasurable. And I just respectfully disagreed because technically, by definition, how it's used in the speed system in tiers of that sense, it is not seen as immeasurable. This all comes down from the fact that by the definition shown on screen, and I even showed these in some way in different clearance to him, that yes, there's technically reasonable perception to say that what the Tarnished does, the Dragon Lord and other characters that scale to him, and also showcasing my tier list, what is being said, you could argue are on that scuff of being, proudly reckoning of immeasurable stance. And I don't even think this is wrong. But a lot of people, how they perceive and talk about immeasurable is arguably on the same stance as inaccessible. So a lot of what people would say inaccessible is in comparison, they would say immeasurable is. And to me, inaccessible and immeasurable are different. They're not too dummy different, but they do have distinct things that would take them to different speed bars, to basically say the least. And with the definitions on screen and just me, re-saying it with my best recollection in mind, simply put, inaccessible is a person able to move in finite, dissolved, deprived of, consistent, concrete time stance, and not seeming to be affected in any case of the way because of that, lapse in like stance in time or anything of the normal speed system, speed with distance, all that stuff. While immeasurable would represent a character by speed or considerably existing or other pros of that, prone to be basically being unaffected or unbothered by all constraints of it. And what I mean by that is pretty much with inaccessible, like with the Tarnish and Placidusax, they're able to exist in a plane with like a whole on announcement of time being into play, aka a plane beyond time / time being not even in the argument / conversation. They can exist in a plane without it, and same time because Placidusax is by existing, shown in scans, can just distort time by existing, right? That would allow them to be in the credibility of being inaccessible because, again, time does not hold any tie difference to them. While measurable is seen to be a thing of basically when you do something, right, that is unbounding between time, space, and other confines of that affect the speed system, like the concepts of that, like Platonic concepts, I guess, like on some DC shit. You hold no case of like, backtrack or pull back on that. You are in no way affected by what time does and or other layers of that. And the reason why I would say Tarnish, consistently, taking that in the most logical stand is not that, is because of the fact of how, time is seen by him and makes other higher people. As the Tarnish has, twice scaled into planes that, don't have any reference of time, like the Earth Tree itself, this chasm beyond time where Placidusax stands, and, because it doesn't have any time, and it's in a finite dissolved of the infinite possible ramifications of time, he would not be affected, making his speed unquantifiable. But if he would disregard time or not have any presence of possible effect of time, that would make him be entirely, unquestionably immeasurable and unquantifiably a whole different regard of speed and presence, you know what I'm saying? Basically making it seem like a motherfucker omniscient or like omnipotent, But that's not what happens by how he enters into the case of the chasm, by how it's seen to be a still underlying effect on the Tarnish by mixed gameplay, and also correspondence with the fact of like being able to be transported in a matter of time, unraveling to something that shouldn't be. He still obviously survives and is not affected in a big regard, but the fact that time in some way still affects him is the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying, that he can still be affected regardless of how you see it by time, And that's the big main underlying argument for why I'm saying what I'm saying. Time affects him still, regardless of how time, without even existing, affects him. The fact that he is still in some way in the layers of time's function would mean that if you entirely can disregard time or any confines of, what makes reality what it is, in a way, I guess, that's where immeasurable will come. Granted, the definitions are there. Maybe I'm not articulating myself in the best way to understand it, but I'm hoping I've made it clear why I personally, and like most other people, do not perceive what the Tarnish or other characters like him do as immeasurable. Yes, it has qualms of that, but what he does isn't that. Because a lot of people perceive what the Tarnish does as infinite. Some people perceive what he does, like Kratos, as immeasurable. Some people perceive what he does as irrelevant. It's just, to me, I'm trying to be as consistent, and what is said by multiple other YouTubers and creators that, scale verses on the same stuff, they would, give you the argument for why it doesn't make sense for that to be the case. So, again, like, it's whatever, right? But that's the reason why I disagree. Then same time with the fact of me talking about where I got the greater emphasis of reasoning and why I stand where I stand for was about the Elden Ring strategy books. And simply to say, the strategy books, even if they're not published by From Software by themselves, there's multiple scans, multiple showcases that they earn a profit, they're in tie with it, they proof check it, they hold rights in publishing, they are ingrained within the different sources, talks of lore, and even just gameplay aspects that From Software is known for. And the fact is that if it's shown in public shops, it's shown on Amazon, different accordance to that, and it has things in the links that show they are not fan-made, that they are tied to them, it shows that. He was trying to argue basically that these books have no credibility. Now, I thought, to correct myself, that these were novelization. They are not. I got told that from a source that was not reliable by a case of another, onlooker of Elden Ring power scaling. But it doesn't change the fact that these are still credible if you want to get better, insight and lore. So because this book does hold reference to different, publications, magazines and different things of that sense that, publicly display that, and the publications of this and this show that. So with the publications, no repetition, showcasing that, that is why I stand what I stand. It became an argument of that arguably he would have to disprove with me showing reasons for why. And then eventually he just thought, it was the same thing with the Heimdall argument, with again not understanding my reasons and basically trying to call me retarded for why I believe what I believe. And this is where I just got a whole new level of just straight up just dislike and feel of this repulsive, radiant, negative energy, because I'm calmly, cordially trying to explain why this is the way it is, and he's trying to put me down by saying that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, when he's shown no actual reason to say what I'm saying is wrong, and just calling me retarded, calling me outside my name, being disrespectful to me when he doesn't understand what the hell I'm saying, and I shouldn't have to go ahead and go beyond all limits of possible perception and being able to actually comprehend the idea that just because something is not made by a company by itself, they do not exclusively make them, does not deprive the actual books that have credence, ties, or anything of that. I shouldn't have to show you that to represent that. I showed a link, I showed different things of that sense that shows that. If anyone watching this from a server will try to say that, only because of the fact of pissing him off so much with his goofy ass, made me, seem like an idiot by the fact of me saying something that, again, he didn't understand in between different form, would kick me out of his server and deprive me of having any possible defense in his server by just layers on layers and layers of conversation, as well tied with the fact that just this man getting so pressed by the fact that I reciprocated the same energy. He got mad that I disagreed with him about this stuff, and then called me outside my name, being disrespectful to me, right? I did the same thing. But I made it very clear that you cannot say that somebody is wrong and not actually provide reasonable proof in disagreement. You also cannot actually say claims and not be able to prove them yourself. And I don't know if he wouldn't go out his way to do that because this nigga's at work while doing this. But even it doesn't change the fact that you can't act like that and be surprised if somebody has a problem with you in comparison. This man is getting pressed about it. I'm just recently calling him out. So this is where I say that you're a jerk, you're being an asshole. You just as a person, as a fan to a person, as me not being a fan anymore because there's nothing to be a fan of. I mean, this man's not going to do anything with his channel anytime soon. This man in the grand scope of, kind of creators of versus battles or scaling is irrelevant. You know what I'm saying? You could say the same thing in order for me, even though my channel is not stamped on that stuff. This is just a side thing that I like to do. It doesn't change the fact that at least I'm trying with my channel. At least I'm putting out stuff. And at least I'm humble and respectful of my stuff. Whatever possible credence of, hail of this and this and this about this person should not disperse / disorient and or distinctly drive a whole different matter of narrative about the fact that how he talks, even with all his knowledge, is not acceptable. Just because you know more than other people is because you are in a better stance of understanding, and just because you have went out your way to do more throughout time or in a situation does not make you better than people, which is exactly the critiques put on Seth the Program or other people in power scaling. And that is the problem with, I feel like, a great deal of people in the community, but people in life. Just because you know better does not mean how you talk about it be right. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And most importantly, what he did in this scenario did not show any better indication of knowledge or way to talk. It just showed that he has a fragile mind of people thinking differently, but at the same time contradicts what he's saying about the idea of somebody thinking different and needing to find people for that. I simply gave reasonable reason why I disagreed, and this man has a problem with it. It's not my fault. I'm one of the few people in your Discord server that had a better mindset, possibly than you, with how to talk, and or had a different perspective than you. That is the big problem. That is why I think he's a lame. That is why I think that he's a goofy. And it all stems from this, not the fact that this man, again, doesn't do anything with his channel. The fact that this man cannot make videos without editing by another person, or this completely not with any influence of himself besides this his voice, right? And possibly help with scans. Even if those videos can turn out good or not, the fact that you cannot do anything truly by your own lonesome, by your own creative matter, proves to me not only that you are not really worth being a fan of, because what am I being a fan of besides just irrelevant whatever that is just the same shit possibly to come, but the fact that you as a person have none to truly be a fan of because you don't actually reckon or walk the walk or talk the talk of the things that would be respected in a knowledgeable person. A knowledgeable person to be able to understand the difference between these things, to be able to understand the difference between opinions, to be able to understand the difference between people. And any aspect of that being seen is just not. And further on, just went to petty shit that if I could rewind, maybe I didn't need to do, even though I didn't say anything about him that was pushing beyond the conversation, because at the end of the day, this is about fictional shit. It shouldn't matter. When I said, after he showed me something that just seemed like the most gayest thing to be shown, the turbulence dude, I say he probably looks like Carvel from Snowfall. And the people who actually have watched Snowfall, you probably know why with that, image or possible case of how I said things before, why I showed them there. I'm not going to actually say more why I did it because it's yap. And I actually want to gatekeep. I want to see how many people can be intellectually enough, regardless if they've seen Snowfall or not, to understand why I compared this nigga, look at him, to this dude. It has nothing to do with him being black. And so him thinking, I only showed him because he's black, which I don't even fucking know. No one knows. You never show your face. And that's fine, right? But, I mean, I've heard him say the N-word before, correct me if I'm wrong, or something else. I'm not trying to just throw out random statements and stuff because, you can peek other cases shit where that's talked about, even with Sarah Spice's video where I think it was oh, he had 3 Kratos versus 3 niggas from Star Wars, right? So, I mean, again, I don't know, but white, black or not, I don't care about that. So because if you're actually a fan of this channel, possibly, or you know me, how I feel about the N-word stance. I don't really give a fuck about that. It doesn't matter to me. All I'm saying is that you could just be weird and look like a weird nigga, which is what my point of Carvel is, because the nigga do look weird, he do look ugly. That is my point. That is the reason why I showed him there. That also goes for me saying he sounds like a nigga in a Rick and Morty skit, and he actually does, because to me, you just sound like a person that's laughably the most skid person to be made. You sound like every motherfucker that motherfucker makes fun of for they know so much more, but can easily have their entire stance and mindset toppled on their head and counter back to. This man just kept messaging. I eventually just said, calmly with no case of like threat or talking out of my neck, you know what I'm saying? Stop messaging. And this nigga had the audacity to basically make it seem like I was being pressed to him and saying something different. And because of the fact that he wants to troll, act mean, condescending, act like a jerk, be a dickhead, I said something of the common occurrence of like the idea that you're telling me not to do something on your server. I'm going to go ahead and deny you. And I said, make me, fuck nigga. Oh wait, you can't, because you can't do anything about it besides kick somebody from your server when they disagree with you. And so you want to make it seem like I wanted to stretch it to like violence or something. Let me make this clear. I'm not the guy that's getting this mad over a Discord chat that I'm mentioning about putting your hands on somebody in real life. And two, no matter anything in life, no matter the unfortunate and shit, no matter the bullshit, ruthless ties in life, there is never a reason to be wanting to throw hands with somebody. I would even argue over words, but considerably, you know, there's contextual things to where arguably over online, if you ever threaten to throw hands with somebody, that's weak as shit. And over Discord, over something like that, it's weird. It's weird. It's stupid as hell, and ain't nobody questioning that. Ain't nobody even asking you to do all that. And if you ever possibly could, listen, I don't advocate for violence, but I bet I dare this. I put this on everything. If you ever even tried that shit, you most likely would get your ass cracked into another stratosphere. I'm just saying, if you ever tried doing that with anybody that actually has hands or actually knows how to fight, knows how to buck, you probably couldn't squabble for shit. So you ain't putting nobody on their ass if you act this humiliatingly pathetic online, because you look like a goofy, you look like a lame, and you are a mean person. It's that simple. And that's a bigger point with me. I don't need to know this man so much. I don't need to have all these interactions. I don't need to know a whole fucking documentary on you to feel like how you act and how you move reckons mean activity. Plus, there's no objective staple for what makes a person mean to an arguable extent to where this and this person is wrong for feeling that way. If I call you a bitch, you can't objectively make me feel that you're not a bitch. If I think you a bitch, that's a negative. If I think you a fuck nigga, that's a negative too. Because if you ask anybody what half of those words mean, you'll find decent definitions for them. You'll find possibly in a dictionary, if you really went that far, to find definitions for them. But if I call you mean, it's not because, oh, you do this and do this differently. It's the way that you talk. It's the way you move. And me personally, how I've seen things, you radiate that activity. And there's an argument, you're dick riding, your over need to always have something to say and say it in disrespectful ways, or not even understanding the greater display of my point, just makes me seem that you are just, even if you're not mean, because maybe that might be stretching it, not a very likable person to have a conversation with. So I don't give a fuck. And then he proceeded to go and kick me from his Discord, and that was kind of it. I don't really care. There's nothing really going on in his Discord besides just, you know, chaps talking, and that's cool. This is, you know, hate to anybody that's been in his Discord. There's no hate to anybody that's friends with this nigga. There's no hate to anybody at all tied to it of a greater deal. It's just the pure fact, and all this, with this whole big tangent talk, is the fact that, to me, I think that how he talks is lame. I think how he moves his shit is lame. I think his channel, for whatever it is lame. And I just think how the man moves and how he's shown to be is all around the grandstand lame. I don't respect him. I don't think there's a lot of respectable things that come from the dude. He could be as knowledgeable as he is, but it has been shown multiple times, you can be the most knowledgeable person in the room, but if you act like an asshole, if you act like a bitch, if you act just out of pocket from a social matter, no one's going to have any time for you. Especially because this whole thing about me not needing to know that much of you, no one says that when they meet just a belligerent and unlikable, straight, horrid human being with the way that they talk online. Nobody says that when they meet a Karen in real life and she acts in ways that is entirely disgraceful, dumb, and flat out ignorant to the most horrid extent. Nobody acts that way when they meet an odious human being on different peripherals of life that moves in ways that is pain, smoke, and representation of a type of nigga who was hurt and is using that pain to fuel more unneeded shit. And definitely nobody says that when we look at objective matters of atrocities or anything like that. And obviously it's not that deep. It's not pushing that level. I'm not really trying to take it that far. It's just, if you ask me, I don't like him because of those reasons. I don't like him because of the fact of how he talks. See the respectful how he moves. See the respectful. He didn't look at himself properly. Didn't argue formally. And most importantly, didn't even unravel the context of what I was saying. And I don't know if he exactly said this, but I don't know if this man said that he basically thought that, like, you know, somehow that Elden Ring would outbest Dragon Ball, because Dragon Ball doesn't have anything near that scale when there's a bunch of shit that proves not, and that was my bigger point. Like, there's a bunch of context to my video and the argument stance on it, because we're considering the tournament, we're considering 12 universes, we're considering a lot of shit, but it's off the basis of basically saying, oh, Dragon Ball can't beat Elden Ring. Are you serious? It's because we're not even talking about as a verse. Cause I think, Zeno carries that. I just think that we're talking about the idea of just niggas in the tournament of 10 most strongest people from Elden Ring, and then a bunch of other aspects of shit from that. So, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter. That's kind of how I feel. That's basically my feel. But if he would respond to this video, I guess the only thing I have to say is it depends on what it is. He most likely will not, and possibly somebody's not edited for him. And if he does, it is what it is. I don't really care. I'm just saying, with that being said, that it doesn't really make a difference. And, for the record, it's not like all of his content is, someone else editing for him, but to actually, like, make, greater productive shit doesn't seem like he does. And whatever his reason is, it is what it is, life, whatever the case. And the fact that at the end of the day, he doesn't really need to, be on YouTube, do all that. But at the end of the day, to me, if you ask me personally, I feel like he's provided multiple times just the publication of just a individual that you cannot respect on a YouTube format or anything else, because what is there really to respect? He didn't respect others. He didn't respect himself. It seemed like to talk that way. And me personally, I'm not trying to act like I'm more holier than thou. I'm not perfect. But to me, I can never stand proudly in my speak if I talk the way I did in that way. But it is what it is.